Hello everyone, it's Jin'taan here and welcome to my latest video. One of the things that I've found is a common problem when it comes to the understanding of the political landscape of New Eden from the outside is penetrating some of the rather intense jargon and EVE-specific terminology that pervades even my own content. As such, I thought it might be a good idea to break out and explain some of the terms I often use here to describe groups of players and how they interact within that landscape. If you're a veteran player, this video isn't likely to contain anything you didn't already know, but if you're new to the lingo of EVE politics, I hope this video will help get you up to speed. The base unit of EVE politics is obviously the individual player, and these are typically referred to by the name of their most prominent character, and this is often referred to as their main. A player can, however, have many characters. For example, I have both my main Jin'taan, along with other characters such as Forum Drama and Frigate Menace, and these characters are often called alts. An individual player's characters do not have to fly for the same faction, however, in any given conflict. In fact, many groups deliberately have their players infiltrate alts into enemy factions before or during a war. These alts are, as you might expect, referred to as spies and are typically used to either gather intelligence from enemies or perform sabotage. Most players, however, only have a few alts, and they will typically keep them either under the same banner or leave their alts unaligned in order to more easily allow them to make money in safer areas of space. These characters, both mains and alts, can then choose to band together into a corporation, and this is often shorthanded as Corp. Corps can range in size from either a single character to the 11,500 and counting in Pandemic Horde Inc., and corporations often have a lot of variation within them. However, a typical corporation has a leadership structure with a CEO or executive director in direct control of the corp, with multiple directors under them. Below these layers are the people who make up the majority of the corporation, often known as line members or just members. However, unlike in MMOs, this is not the final level of organization that players can achieve within EVE Online, as corps can then band themselves together to form an alliance of corporations, which is the highest level of organization that the game itself recognizes. Much as with corporations, alliances can vary in size drastically, but they tend to be a lot more distinguishable politically, as alliances are the entities that hold sovereignty over a system, which is what is used to determine ownership over a given area of space. This is then often represented visually in so-called sov maps, which allow people to see the geographic locations within which alliances hold command. This means that tracking the successes and failures of alliances is relatively easy to do from a simple look on Dotlan, which is the system that most EVE players will use to track sov changes in EVE Online. It's also worth noting that in my experience, most line members will associate not with the corporation they're a part of, but with the overarching identity of the alliance they're a part of. For example, a member of Karma Fleet would probably identify themselves as a member of Goonswarm rather than that specific corporation when talking to other players. Typically, an alliance has a central authority figure known as an executor in charge and a series of directors underneath them. However, alliance structure is hard to generalize. For example, Fraternity operates under a duocracy, Pandemic Legion operates under a mix of oligarchy and technocracy, and Fidelis Constans was a democracy, and democracy is in fact often credited with being the reason for the past tense with regards to Fidelis Constans. Once formed, these alliances will typically operate as cohesive political units, with their diplomats making deals and forging relationships with other alliances on that level. It's very rare to see corp to corp or corp to alliance diplomacy in New Eden. The relationships between these cohesive political entities is often what determines the actions that can be taken on the geopolitical map of EVE. So let's look into the terminology that we use to define these relationships. The default relationship between different alliances is that of neutrality. However, in EVE Online, that doesn't mean the same thing as it means in real life, as in EVE Online, unknown entities are generally considered hostile. This is why you will often see streamers and other non-affiliated participants in fights be hunted down and killed by members of the parties involved in said fights. This policy is often called NBSI in order to differentiate it from NRDS and other methods of engagement where neutrals are not considered hostile. That stands for Not Blue, Shoot It. Agreeing to work together and to not shoot one another typically comes with the setting of +5 or +10 standings, which is typically referred to bluing or being blue to one another. Agreeing to shoot each other on a friendly day-to-day level, but to cooperate for strategic conflict such as an invasion, is generally referred to as neutral. This would roughly summate the current relationship between the Imperium and Legacy, for example. The final major relationship that two alliances can have, and the one that you most likely hear the most about, is that of all-out war. And this is something that may or may not be accompanied by a declaration of war using the in-game mechanics, as these are more tied to one's ability to attack in high-sec than in null-sec, which is where the vast majority of large alliances reside. This typically takes the form of attacks on sovereignty and other aspects of in-game infrastructure that allow alliances to stay within a certain area and remain productive. Some alliances work with much larger alliances than themselves within partnerships, and as such have access to more resources than they would otherwise be able to acquire on their own merits, on the basis that they will grow in the future and help support the larger alliance's goals in the short term. The smaller alliance in this equation is often derisively called a pet alliance by their opponents. Some alliances, or corporations within alliances, offer expectation-free and often exclusive access to space to make ISK and to do PvE, for a price. This practice is often referred to as renting, and the people who do it are often called renters. I'm sure plenty of more insulting names for both renters and those who rent will be posted in the comments below, as it's one of the things that the EVE community has done since time immemorial, as it's generally considered dishonorable or a sign of a lack of skill to be a renter, as they do not have to engage in PvP to defend their space, they instead pay other people to do it for them. Some alliances will also band together in order to form more permanent groupings than simply bluing each other temporarily, and these groups are referred to as coalitions. And these are typically commanded by the leader of the main alliance in the coalition. These people, and those who work alongside them, make up the fabled metagame of EVE Online. The big players who can send thousands to war with but a ping, the Mittani, Sword Dragon, and other names being eminently recognizable modern examples. Both coalitions and alliances sometimes draw up political agreements with one another, such as NIPs or NAPs. NIP stands for Non-Invasion Pact, which is effectively an agreement that neither party will invade the other's sovereignty. An NAP is a non-aggression pact, which is much the same, but also agreeing to rules about what skirmishes can take place between the two in order to create a kind of limited warfare between the two coalitions that can be sustained long-term. Coalitions and alliances can also have mutual defense pacts, where they agree to defend the other if they are attacked by another power, although these have become much rarer in modern times. Under some circumstances, even coalitions, that is, a group of alliances, of corporations, of characters, aren't big enough in the modern EVE geopolitical landscape. As we saw in the last conflicts, solid blocks have begun to form during wars in order to attempt to solidify against attempts to pick down one belligerent coalition first, with Imperial Legacy and the United North, along with a mixture of aligned Eastern coalitions, at war with one another in the last war. These blocks can reach truly colossal sizes, owning significant percentages of the game. For example, as you can see in the data presented on screen, which was gathered on the 3rd of August in 2018, when we were in the height of a major war involving two separate blocks, almost 4,000 supercapitals were represented between the two sides. If you add regular capitals and subcapitals alongside this, you get an absolutely staggering total of 17,436 active PvP characters shared between the two blocks. Of course, this does not mean that said blocks have access to all of that military strength at any given time, but it does go to show the sheer size of some of these entities. Alright, thank you for listening. I hope this will make my other videos a little easier to understand for newcomers or outsiders to EVE Online. Thank you for your time, and fly smart.